The woman stood in the rain, her face hidden beneath a hood, clutching something to her chest. When Mark finally opened the door, he had no idea that this stranger would change everything, or that the people hunting her would come for his daughter next. Sometimes the most important choices in life are made in seconds, with nothing but instinct to guide us. This is a story about how one act of kindness saved 2 families and healed wounds that had festered for years. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more emotional and inspiring content that reminds us of the power of human connection. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that touch hearts. Mark Donovan stared at the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen table, the numbers blurring before his tired eyes. Outside, rain pounded against the windows of his modest 2-bedroom house, matching the storm of worry in his mind. At 42, this wasn't where he'd imagined he'd be, a single father working 2 jobs, barely keeping his head above water, and completely alone except for his 12-year-old daughter, Lily. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the clock, 11:37 p.m. Lily had been asleep for hours, and he should be too. Tomorrow would bring another early morning shift at the warehouse before rushing to his afternoon job at the hardware store. But sleep had become a luxury he could rarely afford, not with the constant weight of responsibility pressing down on him. 3 years had passed since Caroline's death. 3 years of learning to be both mother and father to Lily, of figuring out how to braid hair and talk about periods and navigate the emotional minefield of preteen girl drama. 3 years of coming home to a house that felt too quiet, too empty, despite Lily's presence. The sound of the doorbell cut through the drumming of the rain, startling Mark from his thoughts. He frowned, checking the time again. Who would be at his door at this hour, in this weather? Cautiously, he approached the front door, peering through the peephole. A hooded figure stood on his porch, shoulders hunched against the downpour. He couldn't make out a face, just the outline of someone who appeared to be hugging themselves, or holding something. Mark hesitated, his hand on the deadbolt. In this neighborhood, unexpected late-night visitors rarely brought good news. But something, intuition, perhaps, or the lingering echo of Caroline's voice reminding him to be kind, made him unlock the door. The woman on his doorstep was soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. She couldn't have been more than 30, with wide, frightened eyes that reminded Mark of a cornered animal. But it was what she held that made his breath catch, a small bundle wrapped in a damp blanket, from which emerged the tiny face of a sleeping infant. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I need help." Mark stood frozen for a moment, a dozen warnings flashing through his mind. This could be trouble. This could be dangerous. This was definitely not his problem. But then the baby stirred, making a soft mewling sound, and Mark found himself stepping aside. "Come in," he said, the words leaving his mouth before he could reconsider. The woman stepped inside, water pooling at her feet on the worn welcome mat. Up close, Mark could see the bruise blooming on her cheekbone and the split in her lower lip. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching the baby tighter. "I didn't know where else to go. The shelter was full, and I saw your porch light. I just need somewhere safe for tonight. Just tonight, I promise." Mark should have asked questions. He should have called someone, the police, social services, anyone more qualified to handle whatever situation this woman was running from. Instead, he found himself retrieving towels from the bathroom and putting on the kettle for tea. "I'm Mark," he said, handing her the towels. "The bathroom's down the hall if you want to dry off. I can find some clean clothes that might fit you." Relief washed over her face, making her look even younger. "Thank you. I'm Ellie. This is Sam. He's 4 months old." As Ellie disappeared into the bathroom with the baby, Mark stood in his kitchen, wondering what the hell he was doing. He had enough problems of his own without taking on someone else's. But there was something in Ellie's eyes that had reached past his defenses, the same desperate determination he'd seen in his own reflection countless times since becoming a single parent. When Ellie emerged from the bathroom, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants that had once belonged to Caroline. She looked marginally better. The baby was awake now, blinking curiously at his new surroundings. "I can explain," Ellie said, sitting at the kitchen table where Mark had cleared away the bills and set down 2 mugs of tea. "But I don't want to put you in danger." "I think we're past that point," Mark replied, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Who are you running from?" Ellie's hands trembled around her mug. "My husband. Ex-husband, technically, though the divorce isn't final. His name is James Harrington." Mark's eyebrows rose. The Harringtons were one of the wealthiest families in the county, owners of a development company that had been buying up properties all over town. "He's not who people think he is," Ellie continued, her voice dropping. "Behind closed doors, he's different. Controlling. Violent. When I got pregnant, I thought it might change him, but it got worse. After Sam was born, I knew I had to leave before." She trailed off, unconsciously touching the bruise on her face. "Why not go to the police?" Mark asked. Ellie gave a bitter laugh. "James owns half the police department. His family has been in this town for generations. The first time I tried to report him, the officer called James directly from the station. When I got home..." She shuddered. "Let's just say I learned my lesson." Mark felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. He'd heard rumors about the Harringtons' influence, but this was something else entirely. "I've been planning to leave for months," Ellie continued. "Saving money, gathering documents. Tonight was my chance. James is out of town at a conference. I thought I had until tomorrow, but his brother saw me at the bus station and called him. James is on his way back now. He'll be looking for me. And you came here? A stranger's house?" Ellie looked down at her sleeping son. "I was desperate. I saw your porch light, and something told me. I don't know. That you might understand." Mark thought of Lily sleeping upstairs, unaware of the drama unfolding in their kitchen. He thought of the promises he'd made to Caroline to keep their daughter safe, to give her a good life. Taking in a woman fleeing an abusive, powerful husband was the opposite of keeping those promises. And yet. "One night," he said finally. "You can stay in the spare room. In the morning, we'll figure something out." The gratitude in Ellie's eyes made Mark uncomfortable. He wasn't a hero. He was just a tired single dad who couldn't turn away a mother and child in the rain. What Mark couldn't know, was that this one decision, made in the quiet hours of a stormy night, would set in motion events that would change not only his life and Lily's, but the entire town. And that by morning, the danger wouldn't just be at his door, it would be inside his home, threatening everything he loved. Lily Donovan knew something was different the moment she woke up. The house smelled wrong, not bad, just different. There was the familiar scent of her dad's coffee, but underneath it was something else. Something sweet and powdery. She patted down the stairs in her pajamas, following her nose to the kitchen, where she stopped dead in her tracks. Her father was at the stove, making pancakes, which was strange enough on a Tuesday, but what really shocked her was the woman sitting at their kitchen table, feeding a tiny baby. "Dad?" Lily said, her voice coming out higher than she intended. Mark turned, spatula in hand, looking both guilty and determined. "Morning, Lil. This is Ellie and her son, Sam. They needed a place to stay last night." Lily stared at the strangers in her kitchen. The woman, Ellie, looked nervous, with dark circles under her eyes and what looked suspiciously like a bruise on her face. The baby in her arms was tiny and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and wide, curious eyes. "Hi, Lily," Ellie said softly. "I'm sorry to intrude on your morning. We'll be out of your way soon." Something in the woman's voice, a tremor of fear, perhaps, made Lily's initial suspicion fade. She'd heard that tone before, in her own voice after her mom died, when she was trying to be brave but was actually terrified. "Is that a real baby?" Lily asked, moving closer. Ellie smiled, the first genuine smile Mark had seen from her. "Very real. Would you like to hold him?" Before Mark could intervene, Lily had never held a baby before. His daughter was nodding eagerly, sitting down and holding out her arms. Carefully, Ellie transferred Sam to Lily's waiting embrace, adjusting her arms to support his head. "He's so light," Lily whispered, awestruck. "And warm." Mark watched the scene with a strange tightness in his chest. It had been just the two of them for so long that seeing Lily interact with someone else, especially a baby, felt both wonderful and painful. Caroline would have loved this moment. "Dad makes good pancakes," Lily told Ellie, still gazing at the baby. "He doesn't make them often because we're usually rushing in the morning, but they're really good." "I'm looking forward to trying them," Ellie replied, her eyes meeting Mark's over Lily's head. There was something in that look, gratitude, yes, but also a shared understanding. They were both parents doing their best in difficult circumstances. Both protecting the most precious things in their lives. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of a car door slamming outside. Mark moved to the window, peering through the blinds. A black SUV had parked across the street, and two men in suits were approaching his house. "Ellie," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I think they found you." The color drained from Ellie's face. She took Sam back from Lily, who looked between the adults in confusion. "Dad? What's going on?" Mark's mind raced. He had no weapons in the house, nothing to defend them with if these men were dangerous. And Lily was here, his daughter, his responsibility. "Lily, take Ellie and Sam to the basement," he said, making a split-second decision. "Show her the storage room behind the furnace. Stay there until I come get you." "But Dad." "Now, Lily." Something in his tone brooked no argument. Lily nodded, leading Ellie and the baby toward the basement door. As they disappeared down the stairs, Mark turned off the stove and took a deep breath, preparing to face whatever was coming. The doorbell rang, an innocuous sound that now seemed ominous. Mark walked to the door, his heart pounding. Through the peephole, he could see two men, one older, with silver hair and an expensive suit, the other younger and broader, with the build of someone who spent considerable time at the gym. Mark opened the door but remained in the doorway, blocking entrance to his home. "Can I help you?" he asked, aiming for casual but hearing the tension in his own voice. The older man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning. I'm Richard Harrington, and this is my associate, Mr. Vega. We're looking for a young woman who may have come this way last night. My daughter-in-law, Ellie. She's taken my grandson and run off, I'm afraid. Family matter, very distressing." Mark's face revealed nothing. "I haven't seen anyone. It was pouring last night, I doubt anyone would be out in that weather." Richard Harrington's smile tightened. "We have reason to believe she's in this area. A neighbor mentioned seeing a woman with a baby near your house. Perhaps you didn't notice? We're very concerned about them both. Ellie has been unwell since the baby was born. Postpartum issues, you understand." The implication was clear, Ellie was unstable, possibly dangerous. Mark thought of the bruise on her face, the fear in her eyes. "Like I said, I haven't seen anyone," Mark repeated. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get my daughter ready for school." He began to close the door, but the younger man, Vega, stepped forward, placing his hand on the door to prevent it from closing. "We'd like to take a look inside," Vega said, his voice soft but menacing. "Do you have a warrant?" Mark asked, standing his ground. Richard Harrington's facade of politeness slipped. "We don't need a warrant for a family matter. My grandson could be in danger." "Then call the police," Mark suggested. "Have them do a welfare check. But you're not coming into my house." The two men exchanged glances. "You're making a mistake," Richard said quietly. "You don't want to get involved in this." "I'm already late for work," Mark replied, his hand firm on the door. "Good luck finding your family." This time when he pushed the door closed, Vega didn't stop him. Mark locked it immediately, then watched through the peephole as the two men returned to their SUV. They didn't drive away, however. They sat there, engine running, clearly planning to wait. Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his boss at the warehouse, asking where he was. With shaking hands, he replied that he was sick and wouldn't make it in today. Then he called the hardware store and left the same message. He couldn't leave the house. Not with those men outside, not with Ellie and her baby hiding in his basement, not with Lily caught in the middle of whatever this was. Speaking of Lily, Mark hurried to the basement, finding his daughter and their guests in the small storage room behind the furnace. It was little more than a closet, filled with Christmas decorations and boxes of Caroline's things that Mark hadn't been able to part with. "Are they gone?" Ellie whispered, clutching Sam to her chest. "They're waiting outside," Mark admitted. "It was your father-in-law and someone named Vega." Ellie closed her eyes briefly. "Richard and James's head of security. They won't give up easily." "Dad, I'm scared," Lily said, her earlier fascination with the baby replaced by fear. "Who are those men? Why are they looking for Ellie?" Mark knelt down to his daughter's level. Ellie needed to leave her home because it wasn't safe for her and Sam. "These men want to take her back, but we're not going to let that happen. Like in those movies where the princess has to escape the evil king?" Lily asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Mark smiled despite the tension. "Something like that. But this is real, Lil, and it could be dangerous. I need you to be brave and do exactly what I say, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I can be brave. Mom always said I was the bravest girl she knew." The mention of Caroline sent a pang through Mark's heart. What would she think of this situation? Of him harboring a woman on the run, potentially putting their daughter in danger? But then he remembered one of the last conversations they'd had, as she lay in her hospital bed. "Promise me you'll teach her to stand up for what's right," Caroline had said, her voice weak but her eyes intense. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Mark looked at Ellie, at the sleeping baby in her arms, at the fear and hope warring in her expression. Then he looked at his daughter, who was watching him with complete trust. "We need a plan," he said. "They're not going to leave, and we can't stay in this basement forever." "I could try to sneak out the back," Ellie suggested. "Draw them away from your house." "And go where?" Mark asked. "They'd catch you before you got a block away." "What about Mrs. Patel?" Lily piped up. "She has that secret door." Mark looked at his daughter in surprise. Mrs. Patel was their elderly neighbor, a widow who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone. Her house connected to theirs through an unusual feature, a passage between their basements, a relic from Prohibition days when the houses had been used to hide bootleg liquor. "How do you know about that?" Mark asked. Lily shrugged. "Mrs. Patel showed me when I helped her carry groceries last month. She said it was a secret between us." Mark had known about the passage. Mrs. Patel had mentioned it when they first moved in, but he'd never actually seen it or used it. It had seemed like a quirky historical